Are you tired of wearing shirts that don't align perfectly with your current circumstances? Maybe you should screen print your own. With an avocado. Hey everyone, I think I might have just invented a really nifty way to make high quality reusable screen printing screens with just an avocado, some stainless steel mesh, and a laser cutter. Dream sequence. The idea came to me one day whilst eating some delicious guacamole. As everyone knows, guacamole is incredibly good, but it's also incredibly good at not coming off your dishes if you put them in the dishwasher without rinsing them. Maybe I could use the not washing off very easily ability of avocados to create a semi-permanent but not totally permanent screen printing emulsion that I could laser off to create my design. No fancy chemicals required. Alright, so my design of course was based on my favorite mug of all time, my fruit mug, which incidentally my parents got as wedding presents when they were married. I wanted my pattern to be quite detailed to really give this technique a test. Instead of standard silk screen material, I'm using a stainless steel mesh. The screen I used was a 120 mesh screen, and I custom made a frame out of some scrap wood so that it would be the right dimensions to hold that mesh. I originally thought I would use a picture frame as my frame, but because later on I'm going to stick everything in the oven, I didn't want any paint or any plastic or just anything other than just straight wood and screws as a part of my frame. Put on some gloves because the edges of the mesh is really kind of sharp, grabbed some scissors that hopefully no one in my family really loves, and cut the mesh down to size. Staple gun. I stapled the mesh onto the screen, stapling the two sides first and then the top and bottom. I tried to keep tension on the screen so that it would be as tight and even as possible. Put some tape around those edges so they don't cut my hands or get stuck in the laser when I'm lasering. And there's my screen all ready to go. I grabbed a glass, cut a little bit larger than the top of the glass sized piece of mesh, and another small piece of mesh to use as a test swatch. I grabbed a hopefully perfectly ripe avocado and cut it in half with a fancy knife. Half the avocado goes into a bowl and gets mushed up, and that mush then gets mushed through the screen into the glass. I should probably be wearing gloves on the hand that's holding that mesh because it is still a little bit sharpish. By the time I was done, I had a nice little clump of super smooth avocado paste. I grabbed a paintbrush and my avocado paste and started painting it onto the screen. I didn't worry about making sure every single spot was covered, it was just more to get the avocado on the screen, because the next thing I did was flip it over, which revealed lots of avocado left to spread out. Anyways, I did the spreading and flipping a couple of times until I was sure that all the holes in the mesh were full of avocado. I then went over it again with my paintbrush, but this time collecting up any extra avocado and wiping it off into my glass. Flipped it over, did the same thing again, and then one last flip and one last wipe. That gave me a screen with a nice, thin, even coat of avocado paste. I left my avocado painted screen to dry overnight, and this is what it looked like in the morning. With my screen good to go, I went and set up my Creality Falcon 2 Pro laser cutter. The first thing I want to say is this laser is really pretty light and easy to move around, and that's handy for being able to store it out of the way, or if you ever want to take it to a friend's house and do some lasering together, no problem. I also got the enclosure with mine, which comes with an exhaust fan and some ducting. It's a small little fan, but it seems to push a decent amount of air. Here's what it sounds like. I think that would be fine if your exhaust is just the length of the hose they give you, but since I've got to go pretty far, I'm going to hook mine up to my fancy homemade filter. I got the air assist pump as well, which integrates right into the machine, and that's really nice because you don't have to control it separately. It starts and stops when the laser starts and stops cutting. Little scroll wheel to adjust the volume of air, a light so you can see, and a rollout tray at the bottom for catching stuff. I plugged in the super handy camera and then realized my computer was too far away for the cord. I then moved everything around whilst wishing the laser cutter had a wireless option. Now I can plug it in and it's ready to go. All I needed was a super comfy, appropriately sized chair and my fruit mug design imported into Lightburn. One thing I have learned is it's always a good idea to do some test lasering before you go on to your actual project. I used the material test generator in Lightburn with the speed set to 18,000 millimeters a minute and the power ranging from 10% to 100%. I let the laser do its lasery thing, and in a few minutes my test swatches were complete. At around 70%, all the avocado was burnt away by the laser, so I figured I'd give myself a little room for error and use 80% as my power setting. One of the features of the Falcon 2 Pro are these aluminum crossbars that slot in on either side of the machine. That's cool because you can space them out or adjust them however you want. The problem is they're a little loose in their slots, and I noticed my test piece kind of wiggling back and forth as the cutter moved. I did not think that was a good idea, so I took them all out, put a little strip of masking tape around each end, and then jammed them back in tightly, and that seemed to solve the problem. In goes my screen. I set the height of my laser on the second step of the laser height gauge. I positioned my image exactly where I wanted it on the screen thanks to the Falcon's camera, put on laser-proof goggles to be doubly safe, pressed start on my computer, and let the laser do the rest. You're seeing it here at its actual speed, and it took about 14 minutes to complete the job. When I took it out, I was happy. Oh, now that is satisfying. Check that out. This is gonna work. I took my screen upstairs, set my oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit, removed the tape so it wouldn't start on fire, grabbed a fire extinguisher just in case it did start on fire, popped it in the oven, set the timer for 10 minutes, and patiently waited with my fire extinguisher. I'm going to say this is probably the sketchiest part of the whole process, because if that wood gets too hot, it will catch on fire, I think. I just guessed at 10 minutes being the right amount of time, but I think you could leave it in there for less time. After 10 minutes, I opened the door, released a cloud of smoke, and removed my nicely burnt avocado screen. At which point my smoke alarms reminded me that they were still working properly. So yeah, definitely well cooked, and to be honest, looking pretty fantastic. I grabbed a few shirts from my shirt stack, took my screen downstairs, and retaped the back. Now normally if I was setting up a screen printing screen, I would tape around the front as well by these edges. However, interestingly and annoyingly enough, my tape did not want to stick at all to that avocado screen. Even though I rubbed it on like crazy, it would just come right off. I tried every single kind of tape that I have, and none of them worked. So what I ended up doing is just using the vertical wooden side of the frame to stick the tape to, crease it nicely into the corner, and then the tape on the screen is just kind of sitting there, not really stuck down. This shouldn't be too bad as long as my squeegee is narrow enough so it doesn't touch the tape. I awkwardly squeegeed some screen printing paint onto t-shirt number 1. I will say here, if you want to learn how to actually screen print, this is probably not the place because I don't totally know what I'm doing. However, maybe that's encouraging because I don't totally know what I'm doing, and yet I was just able to make a fruit mug shirt that looks pretty great. And here's shirt number 2. Again with the same color, and here's where things are really put to the test. Yes, I was able to print a couple of shirts without the screen degrading, but the big question is it possible to wash the paint out of the screen without washing away the burnt on avocado? And after spraying the heck out of that screen, I think the answer is pretty much yes. You can see in the upper left corner there's some light showing through where the tape pulled some off, and there's a couple little pinholes over by the handle. I did also notice there was a little bit of brown residue in the white paint when I was printing the shirts, and this also shows up here on the white paper towel as I'm patting the screen dry. Alright, now it's time for the second round, this time with some black ink I got at the thrift store for $3.50. I hope it works. And it does. One more to make sure it wasn't just a fluke. And maybe even one more because can you really ever have enough fruit mug shirts? Obviously the answer is no, you cannot. Take it back to the washing station, give it a good wash, and you know what? It is still holding up. We could do another print, or maybe a whole bunch more. But we're not going to because I want to see if this screen is reusable with a different design. So that means I need to get this screen totally clean. As it turns out, scrubbing with soap and water does pretty much nothing. So I added some dishwasher detergent, put my bucket on top of the screen to hold it down, and let it soak for a couple hours. When I came back, I sprayed it out with my tap sprayer, and that started to make some progress. More scrubbing, more spraying, and eventually I got it totally clean. Good job, me. Now, obviously the laser has affected the screen in some way because you can still see the fruit mug on there. So I'm going to see if that makes any effect on the reusability of the screens by making another design. Back to the laser, turn on the camera, position the new design, which is my logo, put the screen in the laser, start cutting, realize I should actually be cutting it as a mirror image, hit the emergency stop button, flip the logo, use the camera feature to reposition the logo,
and start cutting again, which left the screen with kind of a cool magical effect. Ooh. Handily enough, I still had some leftover avocado paste, so I used that to fill in my little mistake. I cooked it up and noticed a couple of things. First of all, the knots in the wood were dripping sap into the oven. Secondly, the wood was quite scorched compared to the first time, so I'm thinking it probably could use either less time in the oven or a cooler time in the oven. But the design looked good, so I printed it. And it turned out great. Thanks, Avocado. And thanks, Falcon 2 Pro. Without you, I wouldn't have a fruit mug shirt for every day of the week.
All right, let's wrap this thing up. I guess I have two things to talk about. One is the laser cutter and one is the screen printing. Let's go laser first. I've got to say that the Falcon 2 Pro made everything I needed to do on this project faster and easier than if I had used my other laser cutter. My two overall favorite features are the enclosure and the camera. I love the enclosure because it gives you a full 360 view of your project as it's cutting, which allows you to notice any mistakes that you might be making, such as not printing something mirrored, and then it gives you time to stop it and fix it. I also really like the roller top opening. It allows you to set your machine somewhere and you don't have to worry about having space for the lid to come up and you're not holding the lid up and it maybe falls down when you don't want it to, which are all problems on my other laser. This is very compact and it seems to work. The only thing about it is it doesn't allow straight down access to the back half of the machine. It only comes halfway, so if you have a project maybe, I'm not sure, that you needed to put straight down, it would be not that great, but I haven't run into that yet, so pretty great. Also, the camera's fantastic because it allows you to position your project so then you don't have this guess and check of where you're going to be printing. I have a few items on my wish list for this. One would be wireless connectivity so that you don't have to set up your computer and that ends up taking way more space than you want and it's annoying. I'd also love if you could remove the tray and then set the whole thing down somewhere and laser on the surface that you've set it down. Say in the middle of your dining room table, you want your face engraved into the table. Well, then you just set the laser down, boom, engrave your face, and boom. Great. That would be super cool. However, from what I've seen so far, the laser doesn't move down far enough to be able to do that. And lastly, I would love it if it was twice as big, because for what I'm doing, the larger the cutting surface, the less waste in time and materials there is. So that would be like my dream machine. And then I could get rid of my other laser cutters and just have that one, and I would be a very happy man. I should mention that the laser unit in this one is 22 watts. They also have a 40 watt version. Also, full disclosure, this unit was provided to me for free, but they're not paying me anything to say nice things about it. All right, that's the laser. Now let's talk about the screen printing. I was just super impressed with how well it worked. I honestly did not expect that good of a result. So, yay, good. And it's great because Avocado is natural, it's readily available, it's kind of permanent, but also removable without using any chemicals other than soap and water, and it's tasty and nutritious. Safety-wise, I would say you should definitely use an enclosure when you're laser cutting this, because you're lasering over a stainless steel screen, and stainless steel is reflective, so that laser is going to have its beam just flying all over the place, and you don't want it getting into your eyes. So enclosure, glasses, safety, good job. Also, the whole cooking it in the oven thing, I'm just not 100% sure if that wood of your frame would ever catch on fire, which wouldn't probably be a good idea. Also, the sap was dripping into my oven and that could probably start on fire. So those are things you want to be aware of. The temperature and the time in the oven, those were just guesses I made. So I haven't tried any other times or temperatures. It's likely possible that it could be either put in there for less time or at a lower temperature. So that's worth testing out, and maybe let me know if you find out a better setting. You could also probably soak the wood in a bit of water so that it doesn't cook as fast. You could also take the screen off the frame and just do it separately and then staple it back on if things were getting really dicey. All right, I think that's it. This was super fun and a little bit delicious. If you want to find out more about the Falcon 2 Pro, there'll be a link in the description. And other than that, thanks for watching. See ya.